All right, guys, well, welcome to this ON1 Live Webinar. Really appreciate you joining me on this fine Wednesday morning. Hope everyone's having a great week so far. Today we're going to be talking about the new features inside PhotoRaw. We released PhotoRaw on Monday. I hope everyone's having an awesome time playing around with it and getting acquainted with the new tools and features. And if you're new to PhotoRaw, welcome. We're happy to have you using our product and happy to have you editing with our product. So today we're going to be talking about the new features, and I really just want to show you guys how easy it is to access them, how to use them, some tips and pointers on using them along the way. So let's get started. Also, cool. So the first feature I want to show off really quickly is the organizing features inside of PhotoRaw, or at least the smart organize mode, and then some of the quick ways that you can show off your photos to your clients or your friends. So the all new smart organize mode is a new feature to PhotoRaw 2021, and it allows you to organize and manage a group of folders really easily. So if you're like me and you are not the best organized person in the world, I mean, I'm somewhat organized, but I know there's a lot of landscape and portrait shooters that are really, really organized. So if you're not a very organized person, or at least you're somewhat organized, this smart organize mode is really helpful for organizing and managing your photo library. So I typically work in my downloads folder, I work in my desktop folder, I work on folders on my external hard drive. I'm working in a ton of different folders all the time. So one thing I can do is I can use Smart Organize to help me find duplicates. I can find similar images. I can find images that were taken at the same spot. It's really, really helpful for if I want to compare a group of images and remove a group that may not be my favorite or I just need to get rid of really quickly. So I'm in my downloads folder, and one thing I like to do is I like to use Smart Organize to find similar appearance photos. And what I can do to do that is I can just head over to this Smart Organize mode over here, the left side of my screen with this little light bulb. I can select that, and this pulls up my Smart Organize dialog. I'll just make this, well, not that big, that's huge, but let's make it a bit bigger here so we can see. So I have this first option here. This is telling me to choose which photos I want to search through. Now it's really easy. I choose the current photos I'm working in, which this would be my downloads folder. I can also choose to search through all of my catalog folders. So if you have a lot of images that you've worked on inside of your catalog folders and you've created edits of them, you have duplicate files, you have a lot of similar looking photographs, you have photos taken at the same spot, you can search through every single one of your catalog folders right then and there. You can also find a specific folder on your computer, so if you want to just go into the browser on your computer, find a folder, you can search through that right then and there. You don't actually have to import anything into PhotoRaw to organize the folder. I'm just going to search for, or at least go to my current photos here, which is my downloads folder, and then I'm going to search for similar appearance photos. That's because I'm always downloading things. I mean, literally, I'm always downloading things from the internet, especially photographs. And so when I'm downloading photographs, sometimes I'll download similar photos or photos that look exactly the same. So I can search for those really easily in this Smart Organize. Let's just search for similar appearance. It's going to group the similarly looking photographs into groups here. And let me move this little talking head. There we go. So we have 10 similar photos in 5 groups. So if we go through here, we have these different photographs, and they're similarly looking shots. You can tell that these are similar photos, and these are similar photos. So these are basically the same files, but I can organize these really quickly by comparing these groups of photos or auto-marking them within Smart Organize. Sorry, turn off the notifications. So I can quickly organize these with this Smart Organize feature. So one thing I like to do is I like to use AutoMark. Now, AutoMark inside the Smart Organize automatically marks the images that it wants to flag or delete for me. Now, it doesn't delete them right away and it doesn't reject them right away. All it does is it marks them for you. And what you can do is you can adjust those rules with this gear icon. So if I select this gear icon here, I'm in the AutoMark preferences, and I can modify these different AutoMark rules. So let's say I want to prefer the unedited version. I can go in here and I can prefer unedited over edited. I can also prefer a different file type, for example. If I want to prefer a JPEG over a RAW, I can do that right then and there. Now, what you can also do is you can remove any of these so that they're not used. So let's say I don't want the edited version at all to be even thought about within the AutoMark option. I can just remove that, and I can remove any of these, and then they won't be used as rules. So now what I can do is I can also use different priorities with these auto mark options. So let's say I want the biggest priority to be edited. I can move this up by selecting it, and that moves it up in the priority. So now this is the number 1 priority, is that they're edited. Let's move this down because I prefer the raw file here, and I'll just select OK. You can do, if you don't want to use automark, which automark, it will apply the check marks to the photographs that it deems the ones that it's going to flag. But let's say you just want to do it manually. Really easy as well. All you have to do is find the group that you want to compare, and then we can select this option, and now we're in the compare view mode of Smart Organize. So I can compare these two images to determine which image is my favorite, and I can also mark them inside of here as well. So if I have lock pan and zoom selected, I could zoom in here, and now I can compare these two images. And I think I like this right one better, so I'll just select this left one as a check, and then I can head back, or I can move on to the next group by just using this arrow here, and now I'm onto these images. So again, I'd like, well, this one's a little bit too edited, so let's prefer this right one. I'll just select this one, and now I've marked a couple images. So let's just head back into the grid view with these different photos, and let's say we've marked all of these different images inside of Smart Organize. One thing I can do is I can just head up to my reject mode, and I can either delete these images or I can reject them. When you reject a photograph, it basically marks it as a dislike, which I typically use reject. I can always delete them later, but if you're not a deleter and you're more of a marker, you can go in here and just mark it as a reject. So I have these marked, the ones that I at least don't, or at least the ones that I want to mark as rejects. I'll just go through and quickly mark these ones as well. Just mark this and this. And I'll just reject all of these as marked. So now these are all of those ones that are marked in the Smart Organizer are now marked as dislikes in my downloads. Now let me show you guys a quick way that you can show off your favorites inside of the Browse module. So inside of Browse, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a group of images that I like as far as my favorite images go. Then I can just head up to my top bar here. I'm going to go to Window, and if you want to present these photos as a slideshow, we can go to Quick Slideshow here. Inside Quick Slideshow, we can choose how long our images are displayed on the screen, and then we can choose to either have them transition or fade into a transition or have no transition at all and just cut to the image. So I'm going to choose 3 seconds. That's seems like a pretty good time for images to be displayed. And then I'll choose transition fade to make sure I have a nice fade transition. And then I can go to Start Slideshow. Now I have a little slideshow going of these different images, and then once 3 seconds goes, it will transition to the next photograph. Just like that. Okay, and the next thing I wanted to show is the ability to use full screen preview when you're editing your photographs. So let's dive into an edit here. I don't want any of these photos selected. All right, so I'm going to show you guys kind of 2 tools in one here. We're going to be using our full screen preview, but we're also going to be using our new brush shapes within PhotoRaw 2021. So with photo editing, sometimes there can be a bit too much UI around the photo. So if you want to remove the UI and just edit the image as a whole, now you can do that inside of PhotoRaw 2021. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my local adjustments tab here. And before I show full screen preview, let me talk about brush shapes. So in my local adjustments, I'm just going to rename this adjustment brush shape, and then I'm going to head down and I'm going to enable paint with color. Then I'll click this color dropper, and with this color dropper, I'm basically going to choose a cloud color. So I'm going to navigate to these different clouds here at the bottom, and I'll just drop it on these clouds just like that. So I have a common cloud color within my sky. Now that I have a local adjustment layer with a paint with color option enabled, I'm going to head up to my top menu here, and new to PhotoRaw we have this shape menu, which I can choose these different brush shapes for my scene. I'm just going to paint on a nice cloud shape. I'll just choose this cloud shape here, And whenever you're painting on shapes, I would recommend lowering your feather to 0. If I go up to feathering all the way to 100, let's just increase my brush size here. If I paint this on, it just kind of paints on a blob. So I would recommend lowering your feathering down to 100 whenever you're painting on the brush shapes. That way it will make sure the detail is in the brushes. So with our brush shapes, we can also now modify the flow and the angle. So I'll talk about flow a bit later on in this webinar, but let's talk about angle a bit. So now we can rotate our brushes if we need to by using this angle option, or I can just hold down Shift, Option, and then use the bracket keys on my keyboard. So I'm going to increase my brush size here quite a bit, and then I just want to paint in a nice big cloud to my sky. So I'll just paint this on, and just like that, I have an interesting cloud in my sky, and I can paint on as many of these as I want. Let's go to my shape. Let's choose this cloud here. I'll rotate it a little bit. Maybe lower the brush size a hair. I can line it up with this brush. Have an interesting sky there, and then we can add on another one. Maybe let's add on one to the right. This is a pretty good one to use. I'll just make it really big again. I can rotate it. Maybe right there looks pretty good. And then I'll rotate it again. So you can see I'm just playing around. I mean, you can really have creative control over all of these brush shapes, and you can paint on really any creative element you want. I'm just painting on clouds. So that's a pretty good one right there as well. So I think that looks pretty good as far as just our clouds in our sky goes. Let's just hit the backslash key on our keyboard. And so in an instant, we already have a much more interesting sky than we did before just by using our local adjustments. So really, really helpful if you're looking to add in creative elements to your scene, such as a sky. Let's say we want to paint on a brush shape, but we want to view the image a bit bigger. Well, what we can do now is we can go up to, or I'll hit K on my keyboard so I can grab my local adjustment brush. Now let's head up to our window here, and we're going to go to full screen preview, which you can also access by hitting Shift and then F on your keyboard. And so now I have a full screen preview, but I also have the toolbar at the top that I can use to modify any of the tools. So let's say I want to add another cloud. I can grab another shape here. Let's maybe grab another, we can just grab that same cloud and then paint it over here. I'll lower the brush size a bit. I can rotate it. And then we can just paint this on to the left. But now we have a bigger view of what we're working with in this full screen preview mode. So it really helps if you're working on a smaller laptop or something where you want to remove the UI. Full screen preview is really helpful for that. So I'm just going to go back into my grid view mode here. And we can talk about some of the cool editing tools inside of Photo Raw 2021. So one thing I want to show real quick is the all new Portrait AI, which allows you to perfectly retouch a portrait, and it automatically finds any face in your image, and you don't have to identify anything to get a perfectly retouched and modified shot. So let's go into Edit here with this portrait, and to liven up the scene, I'm just going to use AI Auto. And I think it needs to be cooled down just a hair, so let's just cool this down a little bit, just like that. Now let's head up to our Portrait AI here. And with Portrait AI, once you enable it, it's going to find all of the faces in your portrait and automatically apply skin retouching to them. So I don't have to identify any of the facial features or mask on anything. It does it all for me as soon as I hit Portrait AI. So now inside of Portrait AI, you can see in this filter that it has the mask for the face. And what I can do now is, oops, we don't need to view the mask. What I can do now is I can modify different settings inside of Portrait AI. So if you're familiar with the old version of Portrait inside of Photo Raw 2020, we've really revamped this filter. So one thing that's new is this retouching slider. This retouching slider controls all of the details about the retouching. The retouching details are all in here. So if I pull up on this retouching, actually let's zoom in a little bit. So if I pull up on this retouching, you can see it's controlling the amount of retouching happening in the scene. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the retouching slider all the way to 100, and then I can modify these different detail sliders down here to adjust the look of the retouching. Now, the two different modes we have inside Photo Raw 2021 as far as retouching is frequency separation and then our old version, which is surface blur. So if you're familiar with Photo Raw 2020, this is the older version of retouching. I'd recommend using frequency separation. It gives that nice, natural, airbrushed makeup look. So I'm going to pull up on my blemishes just a little bit. I'll pull back on my detail a hair, and that's going to remove any small imperfections on the skin and really just smooth the skin out. Now if I go down, or if I head up to my skin option here and I turn this off and on, you can see it's doing an awesome job of smoothing out the blemishes on that skin and removing any of those imperfections. Because we're in zoom, I'm just going to pull this up a little bit more so you guys can really see what it's doing. So if I turn this off and on, it's really applying a lot of skin retouching and smoothing out the skin on our portrait here. Now what I want to do is I'm just going to go into my eyes area, and because it identifies all of the facial features, I don't actually have to modify any of the masking. I can just pull up on a slider and it will modify that look. So if I want to pull up on the whitening of the eyes, for example, I can add whitening into the eyes immediately just by pulling up on the slider. So I'll go to my detail, I'll add in a little bit of detail. And new to Photo Raw 2021, we have our dark circles option. So if we want to pull up on dark circles underneath the eyes to make sure that the models don't look tired, we can do that here. We can then enhance the eyebrows if we need to add in a little bit of contrast or sharpness to the eyebrows. And same thing with the mouth. So if we need to modify the lip vibrance or add whitening to the teeth, we can do that all inside this mouth option area. So I'm just going to pull up on the lip vibrance here to add in a little bit more color to the lips. And I think that looks great so far. So I'm just going to turn this off and on. And I can see it's doing an awesome job of concealing all of those imperfections and really retouching the skin. So let's hit the backslash key on our keyboard. We started with this photograph, and we've retouched and added this image. Now, one thing, I can see that this retouching isn't applied to the forehead, so if the mask isn't applied all the way across the face, you can always paint it in. So I'm just going to choose faces here. I'm going to go up to my shape and I'll choose brushes, or I'll show up to my shape and I'll choose the regular circle brush. And let's decrease our brush size quite a bit. And what I want to do with this is I'm just going to use this to paint in that retouching. So I can just paint this in on the forehead, and there we go. It just adds that retouching right into there. So if the mask isn't exactly where you want it to be applied, you can always fine tune it with this masking, or at least your faces brush. So let's zoom out here. Let's add a filter, stylistic filter, just to top it off. And let's do a nice LUT. And maybe one of these. I kind of like the black and white. That looks good just like that. So if we hit the backslash key on our keyboard, really in no time at all, we have a professionally stylized portrait using the retouching and filters inside of Photo Raw. It's really that easy. So now let me show you guys a couple new tricks inside Photo Raw 2021, and we're going to use a landscape photograph. Okay, so inside of the edit module with this landscape, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to choose a camera profile for the base look. I don't want to do really anything else to the shot except for choosing my camera profile. So I'm going to go to ON1 standard and I'll choose landscape. Now what I'm going to do is I want to liven up my foreground scene a little bit. To do that, I'm going to use a replace color filter. So I'm going to go into my effects tab, I'll add a filter, and new to Photo Raw 2021, we have this replace color filter. And actually, I'll just go into develop. Let's just use AI Auto to make sure. Perfect, let's use it. So now we've used AI Auto, just basically developed our scene. Now we're going to stylize with different filters. And I'm going to add a filter, and I'll add the Replace Color filter. The Replace Color filter allows you to quickly replace colors in your shot and add in vibrance, add in a different color, creatively stylize. Really anything you want to do with color, you can do with this Replace Color. What I want to do is I want to zoom in here, and I want to replace these sort of orange yellows with this green color in this area. So I'm just going to zoom in here. I'll use my color dropper. And pro tip, if you're looking to grab colors, is open up this color section. Then open up this color dropper, and whenever you hover over something, it's going to give you the color values, and also it's going to give you a magnified image of that color. So I'll just hover over these kind of yellow oranges, kind of green colors, and you can see that it's replacing it already with this color change. Well, I don't want that color change. I want a specific color from over here. So let's disable this Replace Color filter. And what I want to do now is I want to choose, or let's enable the color filter. I'll click on this color change option now, then I'll disable the Replace Color filter. And now I don't see the color being replaced. So I can click on this color dropper. Let's grab a nice color of green here. Ooh, right there. Just like that. Now let's enable this. If we zoom out, turn this off and on. And it's really prevalent down here. So if I turn this off and on, you can see that grass area in here is really livening up now with that green. And I can go to my color change, and if I wanted it brighter, I can just go to my color wheel. Let's just pull this up. And you can see I can control the brightness of that field just with this color slider. So let's just pull that up right there. That's really vibrant, but again, we're through a webinar and maybe you want your grass that green. So now if we turn this Replace Color filter off and on, it does an awesome job of increasing the greens in my foreground. And I can do that with any color. So if I wanted to zoom into these grays down there, those sort of gray browns, I can do that with this Replace Color filter. But I think this looks pretty natural, just like that. Now I want to show you a quick way to apply detail to darker areas in your shot. Let's add a filter. I'll add dynamic contrast. And this isn't a new feature inside Photo Raw, but if you're new to Photo Raw and you want a fast way to apply detail to really the darker tones in your shot, which is typically where most people want their details applied, you can do that really quickly, just like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose Surreal with this dynamic contrast filter, which Surreal is a really intense preset in dynamic contrast because it kind of adds on an HDR look. It crunches things up and adds in some color and also alleviates some of the darkness in the shadow tones. So if I turn this off and on, really intense, right? And I don't want it applied to my sky because it's a bit too crunchy. So to only apply this to the darker tones in my shot, I'm going to go into my masking options and I'm going to choose Lumen. And that's going to enable a luminosity mask. So if I view this now, with my luminosity mask, it's applying this to all of the brighter areas in my scene first. So I can see up here in the sky with white reveals and black conceals that the majority of the white on this mask is being applied to the sky. Well, let's invert this so that the majority of this is being applied to the foreground. So if I view this now and I turn this off and on, now you can see the detail is only being applied to these darker areas in here. That's a great way to selectively apply details or even adjustments if you're only looking to target either a bright or a dark area in your scene. Another way you can quickly target an area is by using a color range mask. Now, with a color range mask, you can target specific colors in your shot. I want to target these specific greens and foreground colors that I was modifying earlier. To do that, I'm just going to enable color range. I'll open my colors. I'll use that color dropper again, and let's just drop it on this area of sort of brown green. Now if I view this mask, it's only applied to that foreground area besides this little bit up here, and we can always pull back on our color range to selectively edit the mask and make sure it's only applied to the areas we want. So now if we view our photo, turn this off and on, again, it's only applied to that foreground area. So now let's talk a bit, or let's expand a bit more on the color range mask, and let's talk about color range gradients, which are a new feature to Photo Raw 2021. So I'm going to go into my local adjustments tab here. And with this local adjustment, I want to darken the sky area a bit, but I don't want to darken up any of these elements in my foreground. If I laid down a gradient here, and I flipped it around so that it was only applied to the sky, you can see that if I turn this off and on, it's applied to the foliage and the trees, and also these trees in the mountain here. And I don't want that. I only want it applied to the sky. Well, what we can do with our color range gradients is we can enable, or what we can do with PhotoRAW 2021 is we can enable a color range gradient and selectively apply this adjustment strictly to the brighter tones or whatever color we want. So I'm just going to choose color range. And now that I've chosen color range, I can excuse me, I can use this big handle here to choose which color I want this adjustment applied to. So as I move this around, you can see it affects the mask a little bit. And if I go into my mask view and I view this, you can see that by moving it around, it's really adjusting where this gets applied to. So I think that looks pretty good just like that. Let's view this, turn this off and on, and there we go. It's doing a great job of applying that burning to our sky.